I think you're good to go.
Okay, you can promote Todd.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Good to go?
Yeah, you're set.
Good evening, everyone. This is Manhattan Community Board 5 Committee on, what are we now? State licensing and permits. David, can you confirm that we have a quorum?
We do. We have a quorum.
Okay, before we begin, I'd like to go around the room so everyone can introduce themselves. My name is Nick Athanael. I'm the chair of the committee.
My name is Christopher Mazzaro.
I'm David Sigmund.
I'm Janice Young.
Sachi Takahashi Rao,
Miles Kerwin.
Zona Zoo.
Libby Hutton.
Great, thank you, everyone. We've got one item on the agenda tonight. That's for 377 Park Avenue South. There was a cannabis application originally on the agenda, but that's been postponed to the meeting next month. If anyone here is for that, we will be hearing that next month. Before I start with the agenda, I'd like to ask for new business. Is there any new business from the committee, either from the committee or from the public? If you have new business for the committee, please use the raise hand button now. Any new business for the committee, raise your hand now. Okay, seeing none, we will continue with the agenda. There's one item on the agenda tonight, 377 Park Avenue South. When I call the matter, we will ask the applicant to introduce themselves and their team. I'll then turn the meeting over to the committee members who reviewed the application, and they will give their presentation. After that, I will give the applicant an opportunity to make any additional comments or statements that they like. Throughout that process, members of the committee can make any comments or ask any questions by raising their hand once they're recognized, and if they're virtual, using the raise hand button. After that process, I will ask for comments from the public. Members of the public wanting to address the application will use the raise
The
hand
meeting's
button.
still on. It's still in the app.
Yeah.
You just
John, we're going to mute you while you figure that out. I'll give the public the opportunity to comment on the application. And after the public speaks, I'll put the committee into what's called a business session. During the business session, only the committee discusses the application amongst itself. At that point, no further input from the applicant or the public is appropriate unless requested by the chair. The committee will discuss the application, will deliberate, there will be a motion, and the committee will take a vote. The vote on that motion will be this committee's recommendation to the full board of Community Board 5, which meets sometime next week. Please check cb5.org for that schedule. And the vote of CB5 at that meeting will be Community Board 5's position on the matter. Okay, so I will introduce 377 Park Avenue South, the application for a new liquor license by Kila Luka LLC. And I'll ask the applicants to introduce themselves and their team.
Everyone, my name is Benjamin Cornbett. I'm the attorney for the applicant. I also have on John Maloney, who I think is having some audio computer issues. I know Donna Dobbin, who was another one of the principals, was supposed to be on. I'm not sure. Donna, were you able to join?
Yes, I'm here.
So that's our team. I understand you guys will give a brief presentation and then turn it back over to us before we give ours.
That's right. So Benjamin, I missed the name of the person who dialed in on the phone. Who was that?
Donna Dobbin, Dobin.
Got it. Okay.
I'm
so
not sure. Can you
John?
hear me?
Yes, we can. So it's
Okay.
Benjamin, John, and Donna. Did I get all that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, great. Miles, will you be presenting this application?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Okay, so I'm Miles Kerwin. I was the committee member assigned to 377 Park Ave. So I'll walk through the timeline first. We received the completed questionnaire to CB5 on June 12th. I did a site visit with John on-site at Kewaluka on July 10th. Then we did a neighbor meeting with the 29th Street Association on the 7th of August. And then we're hearing now. So some brief overview of the application. So the previous establishment was called Gold Bear, went bankrupt around COVID time. The location of the application is between 26th and 27th on Park. The applicant is John Maloney here. John has previously licensed locations around the area, including John Doe's, which is on 5th Ave and 28th Street, Jane Doe Lounge, which is on 5th Ave and 44th Street, The Junction, which is on Lex and 39th, and a fourth location in Forest Hills, New York. The name of the application is Kewaluka Cafe. John described it as an Irish pub restaurant, which will have a pub fare, full kitchen, capacity for 74, one exit, there'll be 3 floors. The basement floor will be for internal operations. The main floor is around 1,500 square feet. And then he's got a second floor around 400 square feet, which is a mezzanine for private events, just a smaller corporate type events. There will be no dancing. He does intend to occasionally have private parties, but no promoters, more like private events for the corporate organizations around the area. He did indicate in the application that he would have background music, but this is mainly background music, and the only time he would have live music or a DJ is for special occasions like St. Patrick's Day, he mentioned, maybe New Year's, something like that. But the intent is for this to be just your standard Irish pub, not a big place that's throwing these big loud parties or anything like that. There is soundproofing in the building. The building's also surrounded by commercial. There's an office right above the building. There are other establishments, 2 restaurants that are on each side of it. So soundproofing does not appear to be a major issue. They do plan to apply for a sidewalk cafe at a later date, but they're waiting on rules clarification from the city on how those will work. But only just a couple tables to kind of market the establishment to patrons in the area. The building is zoned for commercial, and then, as I mentioned, surrounded by commercial and office. The hours of operation that John is proposing is 11 a.m. to 4 a.m. every day except for Sunday, with 12 p.m. to 4 a.m. And then the outdoor hours, I believe we've adjusted, John, to noon to 10 p.m. Even though in the original application, I think it was a little bit longer. We can go into the hours of operation a little bit further later on in the hearing, but that was a point of contention with some of the neighbors. Do you want me to go through some of the neighbor feedback, or should we have John walk through the rest?
No, you can continue.
Okay. So when we had the meeting with the neighbors, the general consensus that we got is that we came to consensus on the soundproofing and the music, just because it's generally in a commercial area, but the sticking point were the closing hours. So the standard, generally in Community Board 5, the precedent that we've set is 1 to 2 a.m. closing during the weekdays and a similar time on the weekends. We talked about the outside hours with generally a closing time of 10 p.m. So when we met with Mario and Judy from the 29th Street Association, that was the main sticking point, where they were saying that they would prefer 2 a.m. closing hours. John's argument, which he can share a little bit later, is that that's a core part of his business is keeping those hours until 4 a.m. for not for like a crazy crowd, but for, as John described it, like the service workers at Dos Caminos, Sarah Beth, Hillstone, who are getting off work and want to grab a drink afterwards, coming by. John could go into more details on that later. So we posted a lot of notices. We originally did not get a lot of responses. I think some of that being due to it being the summer. But when we reached out to 29th Street Association, that's when Mario and Judy came in and voiced concerns over the hours. After that, I went and spoke to 407 Park Ave South, to a man named David Baker, who's on the board of that building. And they didn't express any issues with the extended hours. I also spoke to the manager named Amy at Prism, who took me a while to get her to respond, but generally she said she didn't have an issue with the application. Then we got a lot of responses from groups within the 29th Street Association, kind of echoing what Mario and Judy mentioned in the taking issue with the closing hours. So we heard from 4 people within that group that generally live within the area, Mario and Judy, who I mentioned already, as well as a woman named Cecilia, who expressed concerns mainly due to the subway station that's nearby. So there's a subway station on 28th and Park. And she expressed concerns on the patrons leaving the bar drunk between 4 a.m. and just causing a ruckus around that subway station. And there are residents around the subway station. So there's no residents within the direct block, but the closest residents are on 28th and Park, where the Prism is, 407 Park Ave and all that. And there's also some residents behind the establishment on the Lex, but fairly far back. We also just today got a very long letter from Leslie and also a formal letter from the 29th Street Association, again, opposing the later hours of 4 a.m. And then Leslie also expressed concerns of the soundproofing and all that. So we looked at some comparable establishments just to see what the closing hours are of establishments nearby. So the closest ones to the applicant are Sarah Beth's, which closes at 10 p.m. every day. Dos Caminos closes at 10 p.m., no affidavit. Hillstone closes at 10 p.m. Upland closes at 10 or 11 p.m. most days. All of these without an affidavit. And then Terra Luci e Vino closes at 11 p.m. The Churchill, which is a little bit further down the street, is open until 4 a.m. But my understanding is that application was put in a while back.
Yeah, that license has been in effect for 10 years now, so it's not really subject to our current precedent.
Okay, so I think that's my general summary. I'm happy to answer any questions and open or closed session.
Any questions or feedback from the committee before we go to the applicant? Okay, John, did you want to make any statements?
I'm not sure if my lawyer wants to speak first, so Ben.
I'll just chime in on a couple things and then I'll turn it over to John. Miles, first of all, thank you. That was very thorough. You covered a lot of what I was going to cover, but I just want to really hit on 2 areas. One is John's track record at his other location. So as you said, John is an owner of 3 places which are currently licensed, 2 of which are within CB5. John Doe's at 253 Fifth Avenue and Jane Doe's at 12 West 44th Street. Both of those have 4 a.m. licenses. And as far as I know, John has had no incidents at either of those places, no complaints. He's proven himself to be an excellent operator at those places. And at the junction, which is in CB6, is also close by. It's 39th and Lex. So while it's not in CB5, it's very close to this location. And same story there. He's been there for many years, has had no issues. And just to touch on kind of the way John generally operates his establishments, he's obviously very experienced in the hospitality industry. He's been in the industry for a long time. And a core part of his business is appealing to all the people that he knows that work in the hospitality industry. So people that are getting off of work at other restaurants that are looking for a place to eat or a place to grab a drink after they get off of work. He will be serving a full menu until at least 3 a.m. potentially later, but the plan now is to serve it until 3 a.m. So this is not going to be kind of a club or anything like that. It's going to be a place where hopefully people getting off of work from the nearby restaurants. So as we mentioned, just on this block, there's Dos Caminos, Sarah Beth's, and Hillstone. When they get off of their shifts, they can come in and eat or, meet their friends, have a drink. It's not intended to be, a kind of late night party crowd. It's more just for people that are up later at night because of the nature of their daily lives. And in terms of, I guess just the block in general, obviously that the MetLife building is across the street, so there's nothing there. Miles talked about the fact that the building itself is an office building, so obviously we don't anticipate any soundproofing issues or issues with sound escaping the building. But I do also just want to highlight that I think there is some value in, people think of a 4 a.m. license as kind of this quality of life, something that affects quality of life negatively in a neighborhood. But in my mind, particularly on a block like this, which tends to kind of shut down earlier, having a store that's open, particularly with the subway station there, is actually good for the neighborhood to have people out there, people on the street keeping an eye on patrons. During COVID, there were a lot of places like this where they kind of just turned into ghost towns late at night, and it became very unsafe. So this is going to be a small place. They're going to have 50 seats inside. And I think having a place that's going to be open later with a friendly environment is actually good for the neighborhood. It's not going to be a packed, bar with hundreds of people in there. It's a small place. There are only 50 seats and stuff. John, is there anything you want to add about your experience, why you like the space?
Yeah, just hello everybody. John Maloney. I just want to explain to the committee that this is my business. I'm not coming in here to just open a place and make a quick dollar and leave. I'm not into destroying the neighborhood. My other place is on 28 and 5th Avenue. I'm between two subway stops there. I got the 6th train to the left and I got the R train to the right. You know who takes the subway anymore at 4 o'clock in the morning? Nobody. People call it Uber. People being concerned about noise, about people making noise going down the street. These are people after work going home. Anybody that's taking the subway is people who finish work. They're going home to take the subway. It's just that they're not getting it at 5 o'clock. They have to be getting it at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning. As Ben said, when we open these places, the late night is part of our industry. It is part of our game plan. It's a lot of money these days, those 2 hours, 2 to 4. When people finish work at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, they want to sit down and relax. We are not looking to do a big party, but it is a lot of revenue, especially in these days. I mean, the offices are still not busy. New York Life is operated about 40%. I am hoping to do lunches. I'm hoping my day business. I'm hoping my cocktail hour all comes from there. But we still need this extra revenue at nighttime.
So if I understand your final point, John, that these 2 hours are critical to the financial success of your business?
Like I say, all my places are 4 a.m. That is my business plan always. It's the industry people. That's what we go for. When I say industry, I mean the service industry. I'm sorry. It's a word we use. We use the industry people. We mean service people.
Would you say that your business model would not work if you were not open past 2 a.m.? Or
I'm not going to say it wouldn't work, but I'm saying it could make it extremely difficult in these times. After 2 a.m., that's 14 hours a week. It's a lot of time. And I don't think that the people I have are going to cause an issue. I understand the 29th Street Residents Association. They are the ones that are primarily objecting to the late hours. I mean, I don't know who these people are. Like, I don't know where they live, if they live in the neighborhood, but their concerns are not really founded. They're really not.
Okay. Any questions at this point? Any comments from the committee? Yes,
I was just hoping to confirm that throughout the entire hours, it would just be like seated dining service or table service. It wouldn't just be like standing bar operations.
No,
so the capacity is 74. What's the seating capacity? What's the bar capacity?
Seating capacity
Want to
total
confirm?
34, I believe, and the bar is 18. And that's the existing. There are photos of it in our packet, so you could kind of see. They're already, I think.
there will be, to interrupt here, there will be, it's always a sit down. There's no standing. It's not a stand up place. People don't go in there to stand up. There'll be about 16, 17 seats at the bar, and the rest will be either high top tables in the front and then normal low top tables in the back area.
Yeah, you can see in the photos, it's a pretty narrow place, so it doesn't really lend itself to, a lot of people standing around too well.
Got it. Any other questions, comments at this point? Okay, why don't we go to the public? Would any members of the public like to comment on this application? Please use the raise hand button now. So first up is Leslie. Leslie, we're going to promote you to panelist. So please turn on your video and unmute yourself.
Okay, hi, I'm Leslie Hendricks.
You are.
I'm actually speaking as someone who was on the Broadway Corridor Task Force for CB5 and who reviews a lot of applications in the area. And to be honest, pretty much everybody that comes before the committee says the same thing, that they can't make any money unless they're open between 2 and 4, and it's for people getting out of other venues. And if Sarah Beth closes at 10, then how are people coming in at 2 to 4? I just don't see that as a core business strategy unless you're aiming at people who really are heavy drinkers and are in and don't want to go home at 2 o'clock. I also find in this neighborhood, I live on a block that is doesn't have a bar on it, and the main noise is from people leaving bars and going to 6th Avenue to get an Uber, or deciding, saying goodbye, and it's loud and it's obnoxious and it's noisy. So one of the things that the Broadway Corridor Task Force did was to set reasonable hours for a mixed use, because most businesses are flocking here because there are a lot of tourists who want to stay out late, who want to be in bars late at night because they can't do that at home. But my question is, at whose expense does that happen? And I think whenever you have outside tables and you have people moving in and out, that's one issue. And secondly, you really have I just don't see that there are that many people. If you go to any restaurant, they're closing at midnight. There's not the audience. So you're talking about people who really just want to drink. And I have a big problem with that. And I think a lot of other people in the neighborhood do. And I'm honestly not convinced that if that is critical, then that's a problem with the business. And we've turned down, CB5 has turned down a lot of people who have applied with this very reasoning, saying it's not a business model to work now. So I respectfully ask that the hours be limited. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Next up will be Judy Olson. Judy, we're going to promote you to panelist. Please turn on your video and unmute yourself.
Let's see if I can do this. Okay.
Okay, Judy, tell us
I
who you are.
do. All right. So I am also a member of the 29th Street Neighborhood Association. I was one of the two association members who met with the applicants at the location on August 7th with Miles from CB5, and we went over a lot of the details. Our organization does not generally support these late night hours in our area. The area does contain many commercial buildings, but there are plenty of residents here as well. Although the 377 Park Avenue location does have commercial buildings on that block on both sides of the avenue, direct on the next block up, there's over 550 apartments on the corner of 28th and Park. There are also 4 subway entrances on that corner as well, which provides a lot of nearby transportation for the residents that live there and for any bar patrons that might be wanting to take the subway instead of Uber, as John described. There's a very large condominium at 400 Park Avenue South, which is diagonally across from 377's location. It's on the west side on the next block. It's a very large condominium building. And behind 377 Park Avenue South, the whole block is residential, save for one small building on 27th Street. So anyone leaving the bar and going in that direction will be walking through a residential neighborhood. So I just want to make the point that there is close proximity to a lot of residents at this location, and the fact that patrons would be leaving at 4 a.m. From your business, not necessarily being quiet as they go. And that's really why we have the objection to the very late hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Next speaker will be Jerry Brinker. Jerry, we're going to promote you to panelist. Please start your video and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can. Please tell us who you are.
Okay, name is Jerry Brinker, and I am president of the condo board at 400 Park Avenue South, which is right at 28th and Park Avenue South. The concerns that we have with a 4 a.m. closure are similar to what the other panelists mentioned. And I was curious to find out how many, there are other bars in the area. It's not just the restaurant bars. I think there are 2 or 3 other bars other than Churchill. And I don't believe that they have a 4 a.m. closure unless someone can correct me on that.
Well, to answer
Churchill is 4 a.m.
I'm sorry?
Churchill is 4 a.m.
Churchill is 4 a.m. Okay.
I got it, John. So yes, Churchill does have a 4 a.m. license. They were licensed over 10 years ago, so they are not really subject to our current precedents. Any other application within the past few years in this location have been subject to the precedent and were not approved for hours later than 2 a.m.
2 a.m. And then the other question I would have is the existing bars that close at 2 a.m. If there's another bar that opens at 4 a.m., they could say it's unfair competition and they could request a 4 a.m. closure as well.
Yeah, that's the point why we have a precedent and why we maintain the precedent. Yeah, exactly for that reason.
Okay. So those are basically the concerns. I mean, our building is right at the subway station, and you know, we have a lot of issues quite frequently with homelessness at the subway station, and we've had some vandalism in the building, and I think a later closure can only aggravate that situation, not ameliorate it. So those are the major concerns with the later closings.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. The next speaker will be Serge Hartnett. Serge, we're going to promote you to panelist. Please turn on your video and unmute yourself.
There you go. Good evening, everybody. My name is Serge Harnett. I'm a board member with 29th Street Neighborhood Association, have been for about 6 or 7 years, but I'm also president of the 13th Precinct Community Council. And so one of the things that we do is we have sector meetings, which I attend all of them, and we meet oftentimes with many of the top nightclubs in the area, and they're quite happy with 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and they run very good businesses. So I think what you have to understand is that the police departments all across the city are down about 30% from 2019. And when you open up a 4 a.m. operation like this, that is a huge strain on those resources, you know, not to mention what has already been mentioned by the other panelists as for noise, danger, and so forth. That is something that I think you should be able to understand, that if you're going to do business in this area, you have to adhere to the hours that we've outlined. And we put a lot of thought into it. And we have a lot of bad experience with bad operators. And they're very hard to get rid of once they move in. And we don't want to see that happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Serge. Anyone else from the public like to speak? Please use the raise hand button now. Okay, seeing none, I'll put the committee now into a business session. As a reminder, during the business session, only the committee discusses the application amongst itself. No further input from the applicant or the public is appropriate at this time, unless requested by the chair. So I'll make a few observations, sort of.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are we allowed to respond to any of the comments that the public made before you guys go to committee?
You can.
Okay. Just very quickly, I understand the objections that the members of the public had, but none of them really address John, like the personal history of John. They say that, I'm sure applicants do come in here and they say that they're, you know, going to be open till 4 and run a good operation. But John has done that, and he's done that in CB5, and you know, there haven't been any issues. So the idea that he's like, you know, that he's going to do this kind of bait and switch is you know, it's just, I think his history is not being taken into account. He's proven himself to be a good operator. John, have you had any issues
Well, like you say, you know, I think you know, the last speaker there, Serge, he said about bad operators. You know, I am not a bad operator. I'm not one of those. I just explained I'm here to stay for the long term. The guy, Jerry, is concerned about the homeless at the subways and vandalism. You know, as Ben said earlier, you know, if you have normal people on the streets, people that are just going, finishing work, going for a drink, you have normal people on the streets. Right now, you don't have normality on the streets. You know, my guys are not going to go vandalizing 400 Park Avenue South, my customers. If they are going to the subway, they're going to go downstairs and get the subway. You know, that brings normality back to the city. It takes it away from the homeless. It takes away that edge. And the other speaker, she said, but the first lady that spoke, I can't recall her name, Lindsay, she seems to be of the opinion that people should not be allowed to go for a drink after a certain time. People finish work all hours of the day. This is New York City. They finish at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock. And alcohol is legal and people are allowed to go for a drink and relax. You know, that is the law. 4 a.m. is an important issue here. I am not looking to disturb the neighborhood. I'm not looking to do anything. If I got to put security outside to do it, I will do it. We would not call, you would not have a problem with my places. Community Board 5 has never called me for a renewal at 28th Street. You've never called me for a renewal on 44th Street because I'm not on your radar. I'm not one of those bad operators. I am not that guy that's going to come in here and throw a rave and ruin the place, because I don't do that. That's not what we do. I don't do happy hours. I do happy hours. I don't do pub crawls. We do not do that. We do not do pub crawls. We do not serve kids. We do not serve after hours. We do everything the way you're supposed to do it. We do it by the book. And like I say, I have proven myself in this neighborhood. You can check out my other places. There is no issue in any of these locations.
Thank you, John. All right, so I'll put the committee into business session now. I've got a few observations to start. One, which I think is most important to us, is the precedent. So, CB5, we're in a district where businesses and residents must coexist. So we strive to find a balance between those two interests. And I think over our history, what we've found is that the 2 a.m. hour becomes the witching hour. There was a board member on our committee for a really long time, and he owned operations. He owned liquor licenses. And his motto was that nothing good ever happens after 2 a.m. And that was the perspective of an operator himself. Scott was his name. I think based on our precedent, we have arrived at a balance. And there is some concern from an institutional level at CB5 that violating the precedent for one operation that just happens to be on a quiet block is problematic. Echoing what some of the concerns are logistically, even about this operation, I think, is that, even though this particular block has no residences, this block is not an island in and of itself. There are residents all around it that are affected by what happens on that block. I think CB5 generally respects the precedents very carefully. We need some uniformity. There are plenty of places that are open at 4 a.m. in our district. We don't hear them because there's never really opposition. There's never really issues. And some of the operations that this applicant himself has are open to 4 a.m. and they don't have problems, but they're not in this location. So that's really something to consider. I pressed the applicant on the business need for those 2 extra hours. And I did that because in the past, we have found that operations that are marginal and need to survive on that income from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., that blood money during those 2 early morning hours, tend not to be viable businesses. I don't get that impression from this operator. And I think he sort of hedged my question when I asked him, is this going to make or break your business for those 2 hours? So I think even if this committee only approves 2 a.m. opening here, I think this would still be a viable business. And I would be concerned if it weren't. Because I think it may be counterintuitive to say, well, gee, he needs these 2 hours to survive. We should give them to him. Actually, the thinking is if he needs those 2 hours to survive, that's probably not a good business model. And what happens when operators are hungry that way, they start opening their doors. We've seen it with other venues in the district where they need to make money. They hire promoters to fill the place. And when you're running that thinly, it starts to cause trouble. So we need to be careful when someone says my business needs those 2 hours to survive. That's not always a good thing. The point about hospitality workers, I think Miles, sort of made the case that all the restaurants in this area, at least the ones he mentioned, close at 10, 11 o'clock. The fact that they're going to be waiting till 2 a.m. to go to this venue, that doesn't sound like, that doesn't make sense in my mind, and I think some of the public mentioned that as well. Those are my initial observations. I'm certainly willing to open it up to the committee. Todd, what are your thoughts?
Okay, I agree with what Nick says.
Speak up.
I agree with what Nick says. The precedential nature of the 2 a.m. close is something that has evolved and is well established. You heard mention of the Broadway Corridor Task Force. And a lot of the hearings we've had have had all of these issues discussed and thought out. The only thing I would add to what Nick has to say is, given the economic state of the city and the existential changes and all the empty spaces, it's just going to be more of a mix of residences and commercial businesses. It's going to be more residential and commercial spaces and uses cheap to jowl in our district over time. So the critical importance of balancing differences and being consistent and enforcing a consistent closing time to be fair to the newer establishments that open up, and having that be a benchmark is more important than ever.
Okay, anyone else?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
You mentioned that there are other operators in CV5 that are open until 4 a.m. and yet those don't fall under our current guardrails. So in the future, as businesses turn over, would we expect that there wouldn't be, and if we're following our guardrails, would we expect that over time we would not have operators open until 4 a.m. in the CV anymore?
No, not at all. There are certain neighborhoods that are very dense. Like Todd said, cheek to jaw, was that the
Cheek to jowl.
So, in those areas where the residents and the businesses are so compact, we typically do say a 2 a.m. cutoff is appropriate. But there are, I would say 75%, if not more, of the district doesn't have that issue. And he doesn't have to hear those because there's never community opposition to it. And it just gets passed. So I would say that 75% or more of our district has a 4 a.m. license, but there are special areas, some of them we even have specific written policies about, where more reasonable hours or more balanced hours are appropriate. But it's by far not the majority of our district.
Can I share two observations?
Sure,
I think
please.
two things. Thank you for that context. That's super helpful, by the way. Two observations that I have from hearing from all of the folks that have shared, and I appreciate everyone's testimony, is that we've heard from a lot of folks who live in the area, but we didn't hear from service workers and patrons, folks who would be keeping this business open from 2 to 4. And I'm conscious that there might be a privilege imbalance between who we've heard from and who we haven't heard from. That's not going to change my vote. I think that precedent, as everyone has said, is really important, but that's something that I want to be conscious of personally going forward. And also, to me, having operators near transit, I think is actually an asset for our city rather than a detractor, whether they're taking Ubers or hopefully I would love if they're taking the subway. Honestly, I think the subway is a huge asset in our city. And so to me personally, I think that having operators near transit is an asset rather than a detractor. So those are two observations, but
I didn't think.
agree with everything that
So
everyone else has said.
I'll just respond to the things you said. One regarding the difference between the workers that we're not hearing from tonight and the residents who we are. Community boards are established to represent the residents. So keep that in mind. Our focus here, our job is to represent the community. And then I don't think people were saying being near transportation was bad. What I thought I heard was that the residential buildings near the transportation could be victims to late night noise coming to and from that premises. Libby.
I did want to say, I thank you for your clarifying question. I was also worried about if there's nowhere open at 4 a.m., that there are situations in which I think people find themselves where they'd like a third location.
That is so not the case.
So I'm happy that that's not the case. I did want to also say that I do agree with just general street traffic being a way to, you know, just like normal stuff happens. Not going to change my vote again. I think that's just really important. But I did want to just support that element of people trafficking through a place can help make it not feel like a ghost town. And I've walked that corridor down from the Empire State Building, not even that late at night, and it can feel kind of like a ghost town.
Sure.
So.
Anything else? Does anybody feel differently? So Benjamin and John, I think the sense that I'm getting from the committee is that they're supporting the residents, they're supporting our precedent that we would probably not support operating hours later than 2 a.m. Now, typically our precedent in this area is 1 a.m. during the week and 2 a.m. on the weekends. But maybe some of the arguments that you've made, you know, that immediate block doesn't have a lot of residences. You know, maybe the committee can be swayed to give you 2 a.m. 7 nights a week, as opposed to 1 a.m. during the week. But I guess, you know, we sort of need to understand if that would be acceptable to you, if that's something that we could agree on and stipulate, or if this is going to end in a denial.
At this stage, we would take the 2 a.m. I just want to clarify, when I said like the business would not survive between 2, if I don't have 2 to 4, I mean, I did not mean the business would not survive. I didn't mean I was going to go broke and that like the sheriff was going to come knock on the door. But like, I am here to make money too, you know, so, you know, I mean, it is a business. So I was, but I mean, if I can get 2 a.m.
So let me see a show of hands from the committee. Are you comfortable with this application 2 a.m. 7 nights a week? Or are you concerned that that extra hour during the week between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m.? What are your thoughts about that? Let me ask you this. Is anyone concerned about approving this application with 2 a.m. 7 nights a week? No. All right, John, so I think that's the offer.
Plus the 10 p.m. outdoor closing time.
Yeah, outdoor, we're gonna hold you the 10 p.m. that you've agreed to. That was never an issue tonight. But I think if you can agree to 7 nights a week closing at 2 a.m., then we can stipulate to that and give you a denial unless.
We accept the 2 a.m.
Okay.
Can I ask just a general question, and that is, do you allow applicants to come back in like a certain amount of time to request later hours? I'm sure a lot of people, you know, are trying to do that.
So we don't make promises, and we don't want to mislead you and say, oh, we'll agree to 2 a.m. now, wink, wink, but come back and we'll reconsider that. So, you know, I think if 2 a.m. is not going to work for you as a business, except as a starting point to come back for later hours, I wouldn't recommend that. And, you know, once we do stipulate 2 hours of operation, it would take community support to overturn that. So I don't want to give you any false hope or make any promises to you, but you're always welcome to come back. The law allows you to come back and reapply or apply for an alteration. But we don't give you sort of, let's just see how this goes for now, and then you can come back for later hours. Does that make sense?
I got
Okay,
it.
so, Miles, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. So motion to adopt 2 AM,
Deny the application unless the operator agrees to,
deny the application unless the operator agrees to indoor closing hours of 2 AM every day and outdoor closing hours of 10 PM every day.
is there a second?
Second,
Roll call vote?
Nick,
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Clayton?
David Sigmund. Seth not present, Sarah not present.
Seth's here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I came a little late. Yes, for me.
Okay.
Speak up when you vote.
Sarah not present. Catherine,
Yes.
Libby,
Yes.
Miles,
Yes.
you're not present. Christopher,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
BJ,
yes.
Sachi,
Yes.
Zona,
Yes.
Janice.
Yes.
Okay, so the next step, Miles will send you a draft of an affidavit summarizing the terms that we've discussed. I'll need to see a final version of that by Friday this week. And a fully executed affidavit by the end of the day on Monday. I have to present this application to the executive committee of CB5 on Tuesday. So we need a fully executed affidavit in my hands by the close of business on Monday. Everybody understand?
Got it.
Okay.
Sorry, the full
All right.
board is Thursday.
Benjamin, I'm having trouble hearing you. Come closer.
Meeting is a week from tomorrow.
Community board, the meeting, yes, it's next Thursday, yeah.
Okay.
But the affidavit needs to be finalized and in my hands, close of business on Monday.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys. That was the only item on the agenda tonight, so we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good evening,
Thank
folks.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
David, could you end the seminar for webinar?